So, no doubt we're all looking forward to sitting down to our Christmas roast and sitting down to watch our favourite Christmas movie. Yeah? Sitting down to play our favourite game, whatever that might be. Are you all sitting comfortably? Isn't it interesting that the Christmas story as told in the scriptures, that there are very few words spoken by the characters, but there's an awful lot of action. There's very little sitting down, but there's an awful lot of action. The stillness and the stationary nature of the iconic nativity scene is very rare as told in the Bible. So our theme today is worshiping the King, and we're going to look at various ways in which we can be active in our worship of the King as taught us from Matthew 2. Okay. So first of all, we can worship our King through active curiosity. Through active curiosity. We can do now what the Magi did then when they asked, "Where is he who is born King of the Jews?" Now, you might be saying, well, we already know the answer to that. But that question is still relevant for us today as Christians or as those who are seeking to understand more about Jesus. Transfer that question to our own lives, to our own church, and ask, where is Jesus today? What is he doing today? Where is he at work today? Where has he gone ahead of us in his mission for us to follow him today? What's our part meant to be today? What can we learn about him today? We can worship him through an active curiosity by asking those kinds of questions, just as the Magi asked that question, where is he? Let's choose to be a little more like little children who constantly ask, why, what, who, how, where, when. Let's maintain our childlike curiosity. Let's be like the Magi at Christmas, but not just now, but throughout the year. And there are two things that we are protected from when we worship through active curiosity. First of all, we're protected from stubbornness. My dad had various views on things like politics and all things related to politics, and those views, he never changed them. There was no point arguing with him, discussing it with him. He was a Labour person, and nothing was going to change his views. And in psychology, as I understand it, the phrase for somebody like my dad would be that they were in a stuck state. They were in a stuck state. They had their opinions, and they weren't moving. We've got people in the Bible like that. Like the Pharisees. They were in a stuck state. Jesus comes along and teaches them. He tries to get them to listen, to learn, to have a new understanding of God. And they're stubborn. They're in a stuck state. Simon Peter, a very keen follower of Jesus, he was also in a stuck state when he couldn't quite believe that God was calling him to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with non-Jews until he was challenged by a vision from heaven. We can protect ourselves from being stubborn from being in a stuck state. I've met many church members throughout my ministry who have stayed in a stuck state. They will not move. But we need to keep seeking. We need to keep asking questions. And also this will save us from sinfulness. It was said of Rehoboam, the king, that a major reason why he fell, why he lost it, why his relationship with God broke down, was because, quote, he stopped seeking the Lord. He stopped seeking the Lord. Let's never think we've got it all sorted out. Let's keep learning. Let's keep seeking. Let's keep asking those questions. There are plenty in the Bible to ask. Like, how can a young man stay on the path of purity? That's a good question. Like, how many times, Jesus, should I forgive my brother or sister? That's a really good question. Who do you say I am? That's a really good question as we approach Christmas and as we go into the new year. Who do we say Jesus is? Who are we going to say Jesus is at the beginning of 2025? What good is it for someone to gain the whole world yet forfeit his own soul? There are loads of questions. We can worship through active curiosity, just like the wise men. We can worship through an active solidarity. An active solidarity. This story in Matthew 2 is an incentive for us to be engaged in sharing in the sufferings of our fellow believers throughout the world. Standing with them, praying with them, being in solidarity with them. Yes, the massacre of the innocents is a terrible, terrible historical event. There is a question mark, by the way, about how many children were massacred. Some say 6 children were massacred. Some say 100 children were massacred. There's still a question mark. But the point is, they were massacred. And it's a terrible event. Terrible. But it's not just there for us to be scandalized by it. It's there for us to be mobilized by it. So we can support those suffering in a way that we probably never will. To stand with them. Most carols are jolly and positive. We'll be singing some of those jolly and positive carols later on today, and on the 24th and on the 25th. But not this one. This verse from Lully Lular, Herod the king, in his raging, charged he hath this day his men of might in his own sight, all young children to slay. And in the Matthew account we're told, quote, Rachel wept for her children. And according to Jewish tradition, Rachel was to the Hebrew a mother for Israel in all time. In all time, she was a mother to all Hebrews. We can be a Rachel to all our brothers and sisters who are suffering for their faith. Just as she wept, we can weep. Just as Jesus wept for his friends, and he weeps for his suffering church today, so we can join him in standing in solidarity with our suffering brothers and sisters. And we do this because we are one church. I know that we've got Caution Baptist Church, we've got Emsworth Baptist Church, we've got an Anglican church up the road, we've got a Catholic church down the road, we've got, but we're one church. And because we're one church, we should stand with all Christians, especially those who are suffering for their faith. So we can worship through an active curiosity. We can worship through an active solidarity. We can worship through an active self-enquiry. What does that mean? Well, let's play a game, shall we? Who's up for a game? You're all up for a game. Right, we need to split the church in two, so that one, you're my right side, you're my left side. Okay, very, very simple game. We're going to play, just for a few seconds, Size Matters. Size Matters. We played this last Monday at our life group. It was great fun, wasn't it? Really good fun for those of us there, right? Size Matters. Okay, and very straightforward, right? 2 teams. Okay. The idea of the game is, as the title suggests, we compete to determine the longest, fattest, thickest, and generally biggest things in life. Okay? Now I'm going to ask a question to this side of the church. Okay? And they're going to give me a number. Now, if you know the answer, just don't say anything. Okay? And then they're going to give me a number, and then you're going to decide whether it's higher or lower. Okay? Ready? Right, here we go. Just 2 questions, okay? How many Olympic gold medals did Great Britain win at the Paris Olympics? How many Olympic gold medals did we win at the last Olympics? Okay, I'm hearing a number from my friend Jonah.
It's Dave's idea. 63.
Did you say 63? 63 gold medals.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Gold medals, right? 63. Dave said this side said 63. Which high? You don't have to say the exact number. Is it higher or lower? Do you think it's much lower?
Yes.
Yeah, you'd be right. It was 14. 14. Okay. Okay, now a question to you, and then you do what they did. Okay. Slightly more tricky, this one. Again, if you know the answer, just... Okay. How many carols are in the original Oxford Book of Carols? How many carols are in the original Oxford Book of Carols? Wait a minute. Right, you reckon what? In the original book of Oxford Book of Carols, you reckon there were 50 carols. Right, okay. You reckon higher, do you? You reckon lower. Right, put your hands up if you reckon higher. Oh, this is going to be close. Put your hands up if you say lower. Okay, right. Yeah. Well, actually, yes. There were 197 carols in the original. Okay, so now why do I ask that question? Size matters. Well, because size mattered to Herod. In the sense of, he had to be the cleverest, the biggest, the highest, the most popular, and no one was to get in his way. Okay, and the reason I say we need to be active in our self-inquiry is that as Christians, we can be little Herods. We can be little Herods. In other words, we can get jealous about what somebody else is doing and how somebody else is performing. And they've got a bigger house than me. And all that kind of stuff. Or even they're cleverer than me. Or they've got a smarter shirt than me. Jealousy can lurk, it can lurk in us. And it can come out in very unhealthy ways. It generally does, jealousy. And the reason for it is usually insecurity. We get insecure, and so we get jealous. Do you get that? Yeah? You see, Herod's reactions were predictable. This massacre was going to happen. It was going to happen because he'd already murdered his own sons and his wife. He'd murdered his brother-in-law Aristobulus just because, this sounds familiar, right? Just because Aristobulus had become more popular with the masses than Herod had. Can anybody tell me where else that happens in the Bible? Quick. Who else got jealous? Saul got jealous for exactly the same reason. Because David's support group was getting really, really big. And Saul got jealous, and Herod got jealous. And the question for us in this active self-inquiry is, how secure are we? In our heart, how secure is our heart? How secure is our relationship with the Lord? Because if it's really secure, we won't mind that somebody's getting bigger and better and wealthier and a smarter shirt. We won't mind. And yes, it does happen in the church. It happened in the early church, and it still happens today. So we need to be active in looking into our hearts, being really serious about what our motivations are, what our passions are, why we're doing what we're doing. And if it comes out of insecurity, don't do it. And then finally, let's worship the King by an active generosity. By an active generosity. Let me just take a bit of water. Okay. I said to your boss, Simon that is, your human boss, generosity breeds generosity. We want this church to grow. We're generous about it. We're generous in sharing about it. We're generous in giving for it. We're generous about each other and to each other. And the key thing for me is, this is what was expressed wonderfully by the Magi. Theirs was an active generosity. Firstly, because they considered very carefully what they ought to bring to the baby. These three gifts were not random. They thought very, very carefully about what they ought to bring. When they kind of began to understand who this king was, who this child was, they thought very carefully, we need to bring gold, we need to bring myrrh, we need to bring incense. They lived out the words of Proverbs 3:9. They honored the Lord with their wealth, with the first fruits of all their crops. The first fruits. But because they considered very carefully what they were going to bring, they gave serious thought to this central part of their discipleship. Do we think carefully about how we use our possessions, how we use our wealth in relationship to this child, in relationship to his church? But also they travelled courageously in their active generosity. This journey was not easy for them. It was not easy. 500 miles on the back of camels. Has anybody travelled on a camel? Nobody sat on a camel? I've not sat on a camel.
I have, and I would not do 500 miles.
You will not say that again.
I have travelled on a camel. I would absolutely not do 500 miles.
You get sore bottoms. Not that I've done it. But they travelled all that way. You know? But their commitment was such, they were going to do this. They were going to do it because they were committed to worshipping this special child. And sacrifice was part of their strategy, and so they traveled 500 miles. Again, a question for us: is sacrifice a part of our generosity? Is sacrifice a part of our giving? You see, I'm going to be quite blunt with you, because I'm not your minister. For Kosham to be more effective and more fruitful in mission and ministry, it always does require more giving. It just does. It's just the way it is. And then finally, the Magi, in their active generosity, in their overabundance of giving, they handed down a legacy as they returned home, so that others could learn after them, so that others could meet Jesus after them. Their stewardship of their gifts has been told for centuries, encouraging people like you and me in our faith, in our generosity and our devotion, inspiring us with our generosity and our devotion. So, band, would you like to come up, please? Are you sitting comfortably? But there's an awful lot of action in the Christmas story. So my encouragement to us today is to be active in our worship. We can't worship the King like the Magi did, in the sense that they brought these special gifts. We can't do that. But there are other ways. So maybe you are being called to an active curiosity. You're being called to learning more about Jesus as part of your worship. Maybe today you're being called to a deeper concern for your brothers and sisters who are suffering in a way that you are not. And maybe today you're being called to carefully examine your heart. How soft is your heart? Or how jealous is it? How insecure is it? Be honest about it with the Lord. Go and pray about it. Or maybe the Lord is calling you and me to carefully consider the stewardship of our gifts. Whatever our response, let's choose not to sit down, as it were, in our worship, but to be active, to move, to be actively living out our faith, just as those first worshippers at the manger ended up doing themselves. However we respond, let's do what the carol says. What can I give him? Poor as I am, if I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet what I can, I give him. Give my heart. Let's just pause. The Lord says to us today, I love you. I came as a baby for you. I lived and died for you. I rose again for you. I'm coming again for you. And he asks us today, in response to that love, what will we give him? Poor as we are, how will we respond? How will his love provoke love back to him in these days?